Welcome back to our series on creating a basic website using Bootstrap CSS framework. Now, we've already looked at a lot of different topics, and you're going to see how some of these will come together in this topic where we're going to talk about forms. This is just going to start to introduce us to forms and start to see how Bootstrap allows us to style and control how a form is going to look. So I'm going to give you two different ways of looking at forms. First off, I'm going to look at creating what we sometimes call a stacked form, or where different form elements are one on top of another. So I have here a code. I've got my container and row and column all set up, and I'm going to create a form. That's pretty standard, right? And then I just want to create a couple different text boxes. So typically, we'll use a div for this. And just to create a little bit easier use, I'm going to separate this. So inside my div, and do a class, MB. So that's my margin bottom. I'm going to give a value of 3, just so I kind of space things out just a little bit. I'm going to create a form label. So I'm going to say label, class. This is going to be form-label. This way, we know, are we using Bootstrap's label, or we can use the default HTML label if we want to. Now, I personally find well, why would I use the default labels if I'm building a Bootstrap website? So that's just kind of me. I'm going to say for. So remember, if I have a form field that's not wrapped inside my label, I need to use the for attribute. And this will be the ID for that. So I'm going to say this is for my email. Well, then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to have an input type. You notice all my different types I can have for an input. I can even say of type email. Class is going to be form-control. ID is going to equal email. Name will make this equal to email as well. And then I can have some different things in here I want, like a default value. I'm going to do a placeholder. Example at example.com and close it out like that. Now, I don't have to have it just for my input boxes. Most form fields are either inputs or text areas. So let me come in here and create one more div. I'll do text area, form control, ID equals comments. Reload this, and you'll notice automatically how I get the email placeholder text. It's nothing that I can copy and paste. It just says, hey, this is what it's supposed to look like. And I can go and type it in here. And then I have comments that I can enter as well. So this creates a form value that is the full width of whatever my column space is, and it stacks them one on top of one another. So this has some advantages, it has some disadvantages. Now this takes up a lot of space, but also gives you a lot of space to write those comments, which may be what I want. On the other hand, what happens if I want to put a form side by side by side? So I might have like username, password, and then log in. Okay, so if I want to specify, hey, I want to give a certain size value, what I can do is inside my form class row, I'm going to create a div with a class of call-auto. This will let me kind of resize it as I need to. Here I'll do label. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say div class call-auto. Inside of my call-auto div, I'm going to do a label class call-form-label. So it's a little bit different than our form label. We have a column in front of it. Specifies this can be for password. Specify a password. Then create a new div. This is also going to have a class of call-auto. Input type password. ID is going to be password because that's what the for is for. And then I'm going to add my class. My class is still going to be form-control. So we're going to keep all that the same. Then I can have div class call auto. and just a generic test button. If I reload this, it's only giving me the amount of space I actually need. It's not creating these huge sizes. If I need to specify a certain size, I can do that as well by using something other than call-auto. And I want to have a compact form that's going to make it a little bit easier for me to be on a mobile device. So I'll use placeholders and things like that. So let's take a look at what that would look like. Come in here, I'm going to create a new form. Class row. Now you might be looking at these forms and go, well, wait a second. I notice there's some missing attributes, things like my action, my method. I'm just ignoring those simply because that's not relevant to our CSS framework. So obviously you need to fill those in. I just have it here. Okay, so I have this form, and I can create a form with divs with rows in it if I want to. Or if it's a small form, I can do it like this, where my form is the row. I'm going to do div. And in this case, I'm going to say call-6. So if I'm on a small device, it's going to be half my screen. And I'm going to do call-md-4. So if I'm a bigger device, it's laid out like that. Inside of this, I'm going to create a label, class, and say visually hidden. 4 equals username. You might say, well, what is visually hidden? Well, that means it's something that's not going to be seen. It's there, and we leave it there. That way, if we have a screen reader for someone who's visually impaired, it can give them information, but it's not going to be seen by a standard user. So here I'm going to put in username, and in parentheses, I'll put email. Then I'll say input class form-control. So that way we keep that control there. ID equals username. That way it is attached to the label, even though we're not seeing it. Because remember, that's important for those screen readers. Placeholder, and then since it's going to be a username, that's going to be email, I'm going to put in, say, example. Got a new column once again. Label. My label is going to be for my password 2. Why do I have password 2? Well, I've already got an existing password. Class is going to be visually-hidden. You might go, well, wait a second, in the previous row you had class then the 4, now I have 4 then class. The order of our attributes does not matter. Specify password, input, class, form control, type is going to be password, ID is going to be password 2. Why password 2? Well, I already have another tag with an ID of password. I should never reuse IDs on my page. And inside this, I'm going to do a placeholder as well. And I'll specify password. One more div. The class of this case, I'm just going to do column. It's going to fill in the rest. I'm going to specify a type. And in this case, I'm going to say type submit, because this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to attach something to the form. I'm going to do something with the form. I'm going to submit it. And then I'm going to specify login for my button text. Come back here, reload. And now you can see I have my different form fields. They're taking the full amount of space. I have my placeholder text so I can see them, which is great. And I have a button. If I clicked on that, it would submit my form. Now, obviously, I don't have a form handler, so you can't see that. And this is just placeholder text, so I'm not wasting space on a screen visually if I don't need it. So that's great. And if I come over here and do more tools, mode design, you can see it rearranges things as I need to. And this just keeps things a little bit nicer lined up, in my opinion. So this is a very effective way of handling something like that. One last thing I want to show you, and that is just I can control the size of my forms. So I'm going to come down here, div. So here I have an input, class form control. You notice that all my inputs here have a class of form control. And then I have form control large. And you can see that I put that on a placeholder just so you can see what it is. And you can see that in my ARIA label as well. I have the default size, and then I have the small size as well. So depending upon what it is I'm trying to do, I can make large forms, regular forms, or small forms. Typically, I just go with the default size. Come back over here, reload, and you can see my 3 form fields now. So just depending upon what it is I'm looking at doing and what I need to do, I have some options. So this is the basics of laying out a form. It's actually not that difficult once you start working with it. You're obviously not going to be mixing and matching these. With the possible exception of if you have maybe a login on every page, you might do that. Or if you have a search bar up at the top of a page, you might do that. Otherwise, you typically just pick a style and go with it. So it winds up not being too difficult. Hopefully you got some good information out of how to build these forms. In the next video, which should be coming up now, you'll see a how do we put in and create button groups inside of our forms. So things like radio buttons and checkbox groups and stuff like that, just to make it easier to see. And if you want to take a look at the other videos in this series, you can do that as well.